another live coding with Matt Groves. I'm your host, Matt Groves, that's me, and this is my 13th episode of one of these deals here. And today, I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the Stack Overflow Developer Survey results, and they do this every year. And they've actually released the data, the raw data of the survey results. Not all of it, because some of it's, PII data, but they've released all the other data. So we can start looking at the data and digging into it a little more detail. There are probably a million different ways to slice and dice this data. And that's probably literally true. Slice and dice this data, probably more than a million ways. But we're going to try to interrogate it a little bit and see what we can come up with. We're going to import that data and run some queries on it. And so that's really, if you're in the chat room, I know it's a little early now, some people are still rolling in, but if you're in the chat room, start thinking about what sort of interesting questions you'd like to ask the Stack Overflow survey result data. Even if it's way out there, even if it's a really weird question, and we'll explore what actually is data in there, but just any old question, anything you like to ask. Imagine you're in a crowded room of 100,000 developers. What would you ask them? All right, so let's get on with the normal stuff here. Team Live Coders. I am a member of Team Live Coders. I'm a proud member of Team Live Coders. This is a Twitch team of live coding streamers. And you can see right now we've got 4 of us who are streaming currently. And this is just a bunch of Twitch streamers. We stream about development, coding, technology, making stuff, building stuff. We answer questions, we ask questions, we try to be helpful. And that's really what the Team Live Coders is about. So check it out, twitch.tv/team/livecoders. You can see all the people that are on there. Usually someone streaming. In most time zones, there's probably someone who's streaming something. And I know we're going to have the Michael Jolly on in 2 o'clock today. That's about half an hour from now. So he's one I like to tune in for. I tuned in to Developers Garage recently. That's Ryan Overton. There's the Michael Jolly. And lots of great people on there. So definitely check that out. Okay, my next shout out, pretty standard shout out here, is the Awesome Developers streaming list, of which I'm also on. And this is a GitHub repo, which is basically a text file that is a list of people who are doing coding, developer, technology type stuff on live streams. And it's not just Twitch. This could be Twitch, YouTube, Mixer, Periscope, Facebook, whatever else people are using out there. And the great thing about this is it's just a text file, so you can do a Control F and search for, say, C# developers. And you can see who's streaming about C#, who's streaming about .NET, who's streaming about game development, etc. This list hasn't been updated in about 5 months. 13 days. So it gets updated a lot of people on here, and I like to look for people who are doing stuff with databases and data. So there's myself, and the same names that I continually see on there. Nobody new on the list. Since this hasn't been updated in 13 days, I just checked this on Tuesday, so there's nobody new there. But definitely, if you're looking for somebody who's streaming something that is along your interest, whether game development or F# or whatever, do a Control F here and check it out. It's the Awesome Developers streaming list. And if you are yourself streaming about development and technology and making stuff, go to this repo and submit a pull request and get yourself on that list so people can find you. All right, what else? Oh, I almost forgot to turn on the Twitch bot. I better do that quick before people start rolling in here. This is Matt's Twitch bot. Okay. Got it. There it is. It's now running. It is now collecting all your chat messages into a database that I have running on my current machine locally. I don't know what to do with this data yet, but it's every Twitch streamer's got to do a Twitch bot at some point. So I did that. It's a very, very basic, probably like the most minimalist TwitchBot you can possibly do it. It just listens to the chat and stores all those messages. And that's it. Okay, what else? Okay, so all my videos, they're on Twitch for like 30 days or something like that, then they expire, but I also export them all over to YouTube. You can check those out, bit.ly/GrovesTube. Get yourself over there, check out the archives. If you don't want to watch an entire stream, that's cool. I've got some shorter clips of the most interesting bits that I think of into little highlight clips. You can watch those too. This is sort of a swag experiment that I'm doing right now, cafepress.com/MattGroves. Haven't done much new with that, but if you're interested in that, check it out. Buy yourself a coffee mug or a t-shirt or something, just for funsies. I'm not trying to make any money there. This is really just for my own fun benefit. All right, I am going on vacation soon. I will not be back until June 13th. That'll be the next stream, probably. Now, I may not come back from vacation. Going on a cruise, and I may just want to stay on the boat for the rest of my life. But if I do come back, the next stream will be June 13th. That is a Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Probably. So you're not going to see me on the stream here for a while. That's where I'm at. There's plenty of other people to check out on the Team Live Coders. You can go have fun and go hang out on one of their channels. That would be great. All right, what else? TwitchBot on. Yes, hat on. All right, so yesterday I raided C# Fritz's channel, and he's known for wearing the baseball hats all the time. I am not as huge a baseball hat fan as Fritz, but I am definitely a huge baseball fan. So I went to a Reds game this Memorial Day, and I bought myself a new hat. Let's see if we can get this to work here. Yes. There we go. Now that is a baseball hat right there. I've never done this with the headphones before. This is a brand new Cincinnati Reds hat with the logo from 1869. The Cincinnati Reds were the first professional baseball team. Cincinnati Red Stockings, as they were known back then. They later became the Reds. This is their logo, this little oldie time C, double brace C or whatever on there. I've been wanting a hat like this ever since I knew they were doing the Retro Uniforms series this season. So I got one finally at the game. Super pumped. The Reds lost that game, but my son and I had a great time. So he got himself a shirt for Eugenio Suarez. So I'm going to wear the hat today. Also because here at my employer is Couchbase. I work from home, but they still encourage activities like this. That people put on what we call Rock the Red Day or something like that, where Couchbase's primary logo color is red. So they encourage people, one day every quarter or two to dress up in red, dress up in Couchbase stuff. And so put on my Reds hat, and that's red. The Reds are also a Couchbase customer, so it's a whole bunch of synergy going on here. So I'm rocking the red today here on the Twitch live stream. Okay, what else? All right, yesterday, I mentioned this already. We did a raid. This is my first time actually participating in a raid. I've been raided before, but I'd never done a raid. So a Twitch raid is something you do towards the end of the stream when you're about to close things down. But you want to keep the party going. Just got to move to someone else's channel. So it's kind of like you transfer a little bit, kind of like you transfer your viewers over to another channel. And so I'm thinking, let's do that again today. And so just be thinking, who is it we should be raiding? Like I said, Michael Jolly's going to be on later. Maybe we raid him or someone else in the Live Coders team. And barring no one is streaming on the Live Coders team, maybe we can find someone else who is doing some live coding or some cool building or engineering or something on Twitch live stream. So keep that in mind as we go on today. All right, so today's main topic, today's primary topic is we're going to take a break from Entity Framework. I've done 2 or 3 episodes about this. We're building an Entity Framework Core 3 provider for Couchbase. I'm going to take a break from that today because this is my last day before vacation. So I wanted to do something a little bit more fun. We're going to look at the Stack Overflow Survey data. So every year they do a survey of developers. They send this out to anyone who is a Stack Overflow user, and they get some portion of those users to fill out a survey, and it's geared towards developers primarily. And they publish some preliminary results, and then later they publish the actual raw survey data. the complete survey data. Well, I think they remove some of the PII stuff, obviously, but we're going to take a look at those results, and we're going to be able to write some queries on them. So the first step is we're going to import it into Couchbase. They send it out as a CSV file, which that's not it, but where is it? Here we go. A CSV file here. It's about 200 meg CSV file, which is fine, but we could import that into some other database tool for querying. And I think, why not Couchbase? Couchbase has got a great analytics engine, a great query engine. Let's use that. So we're going to import into a Couchbase bucket. That's the first step. Second step, we're going to set up analytics. Well, we don't necessarily have to do this. It's just going to make our lives so much easier when we're writing queries in an ad hoc fashion like this, when we're doing big data analysis and we don't have to worry about indexing and things like that. We can just put this into analytics and start cranking out some queries. So once we do that, these steps will take very little time to do. Once we do that, we're actually going to write some SQL++ queries to answer questions. And SQL++ is going to look a lot like SQL to you if you ever used it before, except that we have some extra JSON stuff. So we may not get into a ton of that because, as I said, this is CSV data. But there is some stuff in the CSV. I'm not a big fan of the CSV format, honestly. And this isn't Stack Overflow's fault. It's just the CSV format's fault. There's some stuff that's in CSV that is flat. It's all flat data, but it probably shouldn't be all flat data. But we can do some massaging to work around that and still make our queries interesting and useful and leverage some of the unique capabilities of SQL++. Although most of the data is flat, so I don't think we're going to really put our SQL++ to the test. But maybe. So what I want you to do is, as you're watching this, as we're going through the data, I want you to think of some interesting questions to ask. If you just imagine yourself in a room, 100,000 developers, and they're all Stack Overflow users, what questions would you want to ask of them, or what would you like to know about all those people? And think outside the box here. I've got a couple ideas in mind for interesting things we can do, but anything you'd like to ask, let's get it going. Let's get those questions going there. All right, quick check of Twitter, just a little distraction here, just to make sure everything's good. Okay. All right, so I'm running Couchbase here. This is Couchbase Enterprise Edition 6.5. This is an internal build of Couchbase 2796, which is a pretty old internal build at this point. I just been too lazy to update it. So this version I'm showing you is not available to download yet. But you can get Enterprise Edition 6.0, 6.0.1, I believe, which is a free download if you're just playing with it like I am today. There's no limits to it, no license requirements, anything like that. You just download, accept the terms of service, and get going. So I don't think anything I'm doing today is going to be 6.5 specific, but I could be wrong. So just keep that in mind, that I'm using an internal preview build of Couchbase Server. So this is some data I have in here. So see Twitch chat. This is the bucket where I'm keeping all the messages that you put into the channel. So if you were to write a chat message right now, this would go from 342 to 343. Right, so I could just type test here in the channel. As I did just now, it showed up, and it'll take a second. There it is. It refreshed, 343. Very exciting. Now I've got a useless test message in there. But one thing I've done before is right here. I can get like a leaderboard of everyone who has left a chat message. And I'm just now on the leaderboard myself. My first chat message. But there you go. You can see Calvin A. Allen, who is one of my mods, is at the top. And Coral are also one of my mods at the top. Lots of other people here have joined, and I'm keeping track of all that data. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it's there. But I do know what I'm going to do with the Stack Overflow data, to start with at least, is to import it. So these are all the buckets in Couchbase. A bucket is just, think of it like a database. It's a collection of documents. And I've got a few in here. This is like a sample data one, the Twitch one. This family photo stuff is an application that I use for my own personal use. It's just something to help categorize my family photos. It's a .NET application that I've written. EF Test is what I've been working on with Entity Framework stuff. And Scavenger Hunt is a tool for engaging with people add events, like when Couchbase is sponsoring an event, etc. So we don't have the Stack Overflow data in here yet, so why don't we go ahead and add it. To start with, I'm just going to take the same name as the CSV file. I don't have to do this, but we're just going to call it Survey Results Public. Now I can specify how much memory to give this data, and as we can see here, it's about 200 meg of CSV data. That's probably going to be a little bit higher in JSON format. So let's give it 300. Now, I don't have to do that. I could just give it the minimum of 100. But if I give it 300, it's going to probably be able to store everything in memory. So, that gives us some performance benefits if we want to do that. So Couchbase has like a built-in caching layer. I'm just going to use a regular old Couchbase bucket, and we'll add that. So that's going to take a second for that to kind of fire up. You can see I had it in here earlier. That's why it's still got this old number there, but there we go. 0 data in there. There is nothing in there. I have not created any indexes or anything on that data. This is just a brand new bucket of data with 300 meg of memory. So the next step is, let's get this CSV file in there. So I'm going to open up PowerShell here, and hopefully you can see that. Maybe it's a little small. Bump up the font a little bit. It's a little better, I guess. So Couchbase ships with a tool called CB import, which, this is going to wrap around a lot here. Let's expand this out. All right, so that lives by default. Program for this on Couchbase, or I'm on Windows. So this is where it lives. CB import. There's a bunch of command line utilities there, but CB import is what I'm going to use, and I can import CSV or JSON data. So let's do CSV, get the man page for that. All right, CSV, and we're going to tell it where the cluster is, and the cluster is just local here, so I'll just say localhost. Do I need HTTP? I don't think I need that. I'll just say localhost. Username, I've given it a username, a bad username of administrator. Password, a bad password of password. Bucket, which I just created, was called what? Survey Results Public. Survey Results Public. The data set, this is going to be Survey Results Public CSV, but I have to give it file colon / like that, and then generate key. So when we put a document into Couchbase, each document has to have a key, so we need to tell it how we're going to create these keys. Now, fortunately for us, Stack Overflow was kind enough to not only ship the raw data, but also what they're calling a schema of the data. If I bring that up in Excel, these are all the fields that they're collecting in CSV. These roughly correspond to each of the columns in the CSV file, so it gives us some information about what each of these fields mean. And there's a field called respondent, which is a randomized respondent ID number. So it's just a way to uniquely identify that result. So I think that seems like a good column to use as a key. So we're going to say -G, and we use this syntax here, if I'm spelling this right, respondent, respondent. And so that's going to take the value of the respondent field and put it into the key of the document. Everything else is optional. I don't think I need to worry about anything else. Generator delimiter, SSL, skip rows, verbose, threads. I could crank up the threads, but for, what is this, 80,000 records or something, not really worried about maximizing use of resources here, so leave it at the default 1 thread. All right, so that's running now, and we should see data start to show up. We do. You can see we've got up to 4,000 ops a second, roughly, of data being imported from a CSV into Couchbase. And so when this finishes, we should see it show up there. Okay, 88,883 documents. So that's, I'm expecting 88,883 rows of CSV data to now be imported into Couchbase. All right, so there we go. And it looks like 89.9% of that data is resident in memory. So I may have given it not enough memory for it to store everything in RAM, which is fine because we're ultimately not even going to use this bucket, as I'll show you in a second. So, but 89.9% of it is being stored in RAM, which means if I'm accessing this data based on that respondent key, 89.9% of the time, I'm going to get a cache hit. I'm going to pull it directly from RAM, which means we're talking microsecond latency. That's the whole point of having the memory cache there. So if I click on this, you'll see we've got some documents in there, and the respondent ID is just corresponding to a number. So that's kind of what it did. And then it's converted the CSV data into JSON data. That's what CB import's done. These right here, this is kind of where I feel like the CSV data is not really good. Like flat data is not good for this because, you know, it's sort of storing these fields, or these results in this case, semicolon delimited, when these are really separate pieces of data. Now, since they're just basic strings, that's not a major problem. But suppose we wanted to break this up and say, oh, who's using Java version 2 versus Java version 3 or whatever, or who's using JavaScript ES6 versus ES5, that sort of thing. Well, do you want to store JavaScript 5 and JavaScript 6 as two distinct fields? Or do you want it to be JavaScript is the name and a version number is another field? So you'd have a richer sort of structure of data in here. And with this structure, with the semicolons, that's just not going to work. That'll be a huge mess. Believe me, I've been down this road before with a previous employer. So, but fortunately for us, it's pretty simple. For this purposes, it's completely workable. And in our queries, we can just split this up as we go if we need to. If we need to split these up, we can just do a split into an array and get the data like that. So you can see all the different fields in here. They've all been imported correctly. A lot of NAs in this one. I feel like this might have been a test. Age 14. I don't know. I don't know what this is. This might have been a test entry. I don't know. There we go. It's all in there. What are we going to do with it? We actually have to query it now. I mean, we can get individual documents and examine them individually and say, oh, there's a 25-year-old who is from Netherlands, and they're using, you know, they have a bachelor's degree, and here's another place where we've got the semicolon delimited stuff, which that is going to be that's going to be tricky. I don't know if Stack Overflow is compensated for this, but what if they put a semicolon in their response? If any of these are free form response, that's going to be problematic. But anyway, you can see all these interesting bits of data, but we want to get more interesting data about these developers as a whole. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use analytics. So I have this bucket, and in reality, this bucket would be what I'd want to hook up to my live web application, my mobile application, my application that faces the public, faces the users, and they're going to be interacting with this data, making reads and writes and getting queries and things like that a lot. But if I'm going to be running complicated queries against this, queries that maybe take a lot of processing power or execution time, I don't necessarily want to be running those against the the collection of data that is facing my application. I don't want to impact that performance. So what some approaches are is you might do like an ETL and copy this data to some other database to do analysis on it, or or something along those lines, right? You don't want to be querying the same data. So that's a fine approach, and that's a lot of organizations do. And so with that in mind, Couchbase has this analytics tool. And what this allows you to do is you can avoid that messy ETL process and just connect analytics in Couchbase to the bucket, and it'll make like a shadow copy of this data. These 88,000 documents will be copied into another place, another data set for you to run analytics on. And this will isolate the workload. So you're only running those queries against the analytics nodes in your cluster, which means it will not affect your operational data. And for that reason, this analytics stuff is read-only, right? You can't make updates to it because it is only a shadow of the data. And the cool thing about Couchbase is if, in this case, we're not going to experience this, but if I were to add more survey results, if the survey results kept coming in, for instance, if this were a live survey application, every time those mutations come in, they would be immediately shadow copied to the analytics data set. And so let's just I'll show you how to set that up here. There's really just 2 steps. So I'm going to, if I can remember the exact syntax for this, I'm going to create data set. Let's call it SO for Stack Overflow. And it'll be on the bucket, which we called survey results public. I think that's right. Okay. Yes, that's right. And as you can see over here, it showed up under our default dataverse. We've got a, this connects to a local bucket called survey results public. All right. And you can see that link, this little icon over here. Let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. Over here, this little icon, it's got a little link icon and it's broken because it's not, doesn't actually have any data in it yet, right? So if I select star from SO, there's nothing in there. So I've got the data set defined, and mine was a very, very broad data set where I said just give me everything, but I could also limit it to say where foo equals bar. So it's only going to pull over records that match where foo equals bar. So I can just do a subset. My data set could be a subset of all the data. Okay, but we're just going to do all of it. The next thing you need to do, connect. I remember how the syntax is for this. Connect, link, local. Yep, that's it. So at this point, you can see that it's going to start moving data over. And this is kind of like an ETL. It's a really lightweight ETL. It's just copying data over as it comes in real time. And so you can see it knows how many there are remaining, 53,000, and that's going to keep counting down. And as new data would go into that bucket, this number would increase. But we're just going to burn it down as we move that data over. I'm going to wait for it all to get over before we actually start doing any querying on it. So we're at 11,380. Okay, now we're all done. All right, so I want to show you something here. If I go to the normal query and I say select star from, what did I call it again? It was survey results public. And I want to say where, let's just give this a alias because I like aliases. Where R, and I can say where R dot, let's just look at an example document here. So where containers equals I do not use containers. Let's just do that. R dot containers equals I do not use containers. If I run this in normal query, I'm going to get an error message that this is not indexed. So I have to actually create an index on containers here in order for this query to run. I could also create a primary index, which would make all my queries into basically table scans. Hey, Calvin Allen, what's going on? Thanks for stopping by the old stream. We're doing some Stack Overflow analysis. So if you have ideas for questions that you would like to ask, no matter how crazy or out there they might be, of the Stack Overflow data, put them in the chat, and we'll see if we can write a query to at least partially answer that. And I'll show you some of the fields that they have there in a minute here. But I want to make a point about indexing, and this is a key difference between operational data and analytical data. Is that in order for me to have a query like this in operations, I need to have an index on here to make it performant. I could put a primary index, which would essentially be a table scan of all the documents. There's 88,000 documents. It's going to have to scan every single document. That's not going to work in an operational setting. That's going to be very, very slow. Especially, 88,000 is not that much. So as we get bigger and bigger, it's just going to get impossibly slow. But if I take that same query, I go over here to analytics, and I say, and this is going to be SO this time, and I run that query. It's going to run it in a reasonable amount of time without indexing. I didn't have to create an index. Calvin says, who else is in here? Bueller. Well, according to Streamlabs, there is, well, now it says 4. There was 3 at one point, then it was 2, and I don't know. So there's the result. It didn't need an index for it. However, these results are way too big for me to actually show in a browser, so I'm just going to go ahead and just do like a limit 10. And that is, I took off the quote there, limit 10. And so as you can see, that's 70 milliseconds, which is not too shabby. This is running on my own personal machine. It's one node machine, so we could probably do better than that in a different configuration. That's not too shabby. I didn't create any indexes for that. I just ran the query, and away we go. And I get the results, limit to 10. I didn't have to create any indexes for that. It's all just out of the box. That's how now analytics should work. I shouldn't have to worry about creating indexes because my queries are going to be so wildly different from each other that I'd spend half the day just creating the right indexes and doing index tuning. But in reality, the analytics queries are not going to be hooked up, for the most part, they're not going to be hooked up to a public-facing web app, for instance. In some cases they might be, but in most cases it's going to be dashboards and data scientists and analysts who are writing these queries. It'll be a handful of internal people writing these queries. Senad Meskin has, can you do an average age of people who don't use containers? That's a really good question. I have a little document here that I've got some interesting questions to ask. So I'm going to add that here. Average of people who don't use containers. And this is from Senad Meskin. Thank you for coming in, Senad. That's a great question to ask. Do you have before I write the query, do you have a hypothesis for that? Because I think what you're getting at is you're maybe suggesting that the older guys like me are not using containers as much as the younger developers. Or maybe you think it's vice versa. Maybe you think it's the old fogies like me who are into the containers, and young people, the younger developers, are not really into it yet. I'd be curious to see what your hypothesis is before we actually do that. So thank you. That's a great question. Keep those kind of questions coming. Okay, so we've got... Calvin! Very nice of you to give Senad Meskin, I hope I'm saying that right, a subscription. I really appreciate that. And Calvin, you're awesome. Yes, very, very cool. Thank you for that. All right. So we've got all this data in here. So let's just do some basic stuff to get the shape of this data. We're going to select the count from SO. So we've got 88,883 documents total, which matches the command line earlier. Yep. Senad, I'm just interested. I'm 35 and I don't use them, but not my request. I just work in an environment where we don't have anything related to containers. Okay. The container thing is kind of weird for me. I'm kind of in a weird place in my career. Like my last job as a core developer, we weren't using containers. We were using VMs actually, but only for development. But I feel like containers were just sort of starting to get more and more use in the last year of that job. Calvin works where I used to work, and so they still don't have containers, which is fine. Containers aren't like this magical thing that are going to solve every problem. Now I say that, and Robert Tables is going to show up and slap me around. But as containers got more and more popular, I actually jumped roles into this current role as a developer advocate. And my boss was at the time was way into containers. He was like a Docker captain and things like that. And Docker was just like red hot for like a year or two. We're going to migrate everything to AWS, and perhaps once there, the environment will be better suited for it than our current. Yeah, I think even as containers were red hot for a year or two, I think it's all about orchestration and Kubernetes these days, which use containers, right? But it's not so much about the containers themselves anymore. It is about the actual orchestrating them. And I think for your particular environment, Calvin, I think that could be potentially a huge benefit for you. But anyway, we're going to explore containers a little bit. We're going to find out average age and things like that. All right, so I just wanted to do some basic sanity checks on this data to see that, 88,883, that made it through there. And so I had a query that I came up with because I just noticed this. If you look at, I want to bring this up here. This is the, if you look at the data that you get when you download from Stack Overflow, you get a README, a PDF, which is the actual text of the questions. You get the raw results, which we imported into Couchbase, and then you get this handy file they're calling a schema. And what the schema is it defines what each of these short field names actually means. So, country is short for in which country do you currently reside, right? So in our data, it's going to say country, but this is a question that was actually asked. And so one thing I found interesting, there's a question, how confident are you that your manager knows what they're doing? And they, in smart quotes here, but how confident are you that your manager knows what they're doing? And they coded this field as manager idiot, which is funny because the actual survey question does not use the word idiot, but the short version of it says idiot. So basically they're asking, do you think your manager is an idiot? And there's other manager questions like, do you believe you need to be a manager to make more money? Do you need to be a manager? You want to be a manager yourself in the future? So this got me thinking, how many people responded that they think their manager is an idiot? And of those, how many of them actually want to become a manager in the future? So we could ask this question, and we could say select count where SO, let's just call this S dot, and it is MGR idiot. So I don't actually know what the values are there. So let's just do something exploratory here first. Select all the distinct possibilities for manager idiot. So there's 5 different answers. So let's just copy and paste this just to stick it over here. Well, let's get table view. Might be a little more concise. Okay. So I don't have a manager. NA, I don't know what NA would mean in that situation. Not at all confident, somewhat confident, very confident. Okay. So let's just say we want to find people who are not at all confident, where s.manager idiot equals not at all confident. So how many people of those 88,000 are not at all confident in their manager? 9,500 of them. So let's do some quick math here. 95, 16, 88,000. 10% of developers who took this survey are not at all confident in their manager. Very interesting. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to get the breakdown by those who want to be a manager themselves. So we're going to just do this as my manager is an idiot count, and I'm going to group by s.manager_want. All right, and let's keep that in JSON view. Okay, so here are the results. Let's order these by count descending. All right, so of those 9,000 or whatever it was who think their manager is an idiot, the plurality of them, 3,500, say that they don't want to be a manager themselves. So they think their manager is an idiot and they don't want to be a manager themselves. Okay, interesting what that kind of person might be like. 31,000 think their manager is an idiot, but are not sure if they want to be a manager themselves. I feel like that's a pretty, that's, if I thought my manager was an idiot, and I don't, if I thought that, I wouldn't be so sure. I think this is a nice, honest answer, because it's like, well, my manager is an idiot. I'm not confident in him, but would I be any better? 2,300 people think their manager is an idiot, but they themselves want to be a manager. So it's either irony because they're going to become an idiot, someone else's idiot manager, or it's they think they could do a better job than their manager. That's kind of my my thought there. This is interesting that 392 of them think their manager is an idiot, but yet are already themselves a manager. So perhaps it's a manager whose manager is an idiot, like up the chain. So you can imagine as you go further up the chain, hopefully there's less idiocy, or maybe there's more idiocy. I don't know. And then 7 are NA. I don't know what NA would mean in this context. it doesn't. They don't have a manager. Maybe that might be what that means. So there we go. That's let's call that my first query here, and let's change this highlighting here to SQL. So that's the query if you want to run to see all those people who think their manager is an idiot and their thoughts on themselves becoming a manager. Very interesting. Okay. Let's get on to Senad's question. Can you do average age of people who don't use containers? Okay. So the containers one, where was that? That was I just saw it. Where did it go? Container. Okay, just containers. So again, I'm going to be just exploratory here and just find out what are the possibilities for containers. Okay. Oh, okay. So interesting. So this is one of those cases where you can select multiple answers. So we kind of want. We're going to do a like here. We're going to say like. I do not use containers. I think that's what you wanted to know, right? So we'll just do a count. These are people who have answered that one of their answers is I do not use containers, which is interesting that how is this possible? How do you use containers? And the answer is in production and I do not use containers. So how is it possible that they're in production but they're not using it? Very, very confusing there, but we'll just go with it. So what have we got? Syntax there. Oh, yeah, s.containers. I just forgot how to write SQL. Where containers like I do not use containers. So we've got 39,000 people who don't. That's a pretty big chunk. That's almost half of everyone who responds to the survey is not using containers. Calvin says, could be a DevOps team managing it, I suppose, not the developer answering question. I guess that's a possibility. So the developer says, I don't use containers, but someone up the chain deploys what I write in containers. I'm not really sure how that would work. And isn't the point of DevOps team to be, you're not just throwing it over the wall. You're actually working on both dev and ops. You're straddling both worlds in some way. Just strange as all. I think it just goes. One of my points about surveys like this that I wanted to make is that the actual answers, the actual quality of the answers here, the more people you get to respond, the better accuracy you have. But we can't necessarily take this data to draw any sort of solid conclusions with it. And that's not just true of Stack Overflow. That's true of any sort of survey data. That's why whenever there's a news article that draws some conclusion in the headline, oh, hey, Coral, yeah, not everyone does DevOps right. Well, fair point, but I would say if you're not doing that, then why even using the term DevOps? But fair point. And lots of people who use the word agile who have no idea what that even means. They just think it's a word that means we're going to do more work for less money or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, it's all about buzzwords. It's just funny. I did a code mass session about buzzwords, and I sort of skewered buzzwords, and it was that video's been posted to YouTube if you want to check that out. But anyway, I got some laughs. It was pretty fun to do because I live in a world of buzzwords. I'm a developer advocate, and I'm swimming in buzzwords every day. But that's neither here nor there. All right. So about half people don't use containers. Now, what you wanted to know, Sanad, is the average age, right? Average age of people. Okay, so we can get age. Age is one of the pieces of data here. We've got all kinds of different stuff about age. Average age, language work with. Where is age? Here it is. It's just called age. Okay. So we're going to say average s.age. Now this may not work because I think it because this is CSV, it stores it as a string. Yeah, it does. So if I try to do an average of string, it's going to barf. Yeah, so that's no problem. I can just do this. I can just say toNumber. Okay, now I still don't think if I do average, I think this will still barf. I'm wrong. Okay, so that works just fine. So I got to convert it to a number and then run the average on that. So to answer your question, the average age of people who say they don't use containers is 30.2 years old. Would that surprise you, Sanad Meskin? So you said you are 35. You didn't have to share that with us, by the way, but you are above average for those who do not use containers. So interesting. So that's question number 2 asked. Okay. All right. So I wanted to ask some questions around Couchbase and I've actually already done this. I've been playing with this data. You know, in the Stack Overflow survey results, they have, so Sanad says, yes, he is surprised that the average age is 30. So it's an interesting piece of data. I wouldn't necessarily draw any conclusions on this, Sanad, because like I said, it's, you know, the people actually responding to this, they may not be completely, you know, the answers can vary in quality, right? And this is not Stack Overflow's fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's just the way that these surveys work, right? So I would say use that as a loose guideline, maybe a rule of thumb, but don't draw a conclusion about that number there. So, all right. So what I wanted to do is, you know, if you look at the Stack Overflow survey result, and I'm very interested in databases, and they come up with this thing where it's like the most, well, I can just bring it up here, I guess. Stack Overflow survey results. And so they compile the data themselves. That's 2018, I want 2019. And they run some standard reports on it. And so in the technology area, they talk about programming languages, which we can get to, web frameworks, etc., and databases. So Couchbase is actually, this is the first year that Couchbase is on the Stack Overflow survey, which is cool. We've never been on there before. But I want to start by saying this. Only 2% of people reported to actually have used it in the Stack Overflow result. So it's a pretty low number of Stack Overflow users are using Couchbase, at least that they're aware of. And some portion of that may even be confused between Couchbase and CouchDB. They are different things. And so that's absolute, since CouchDB is not on this list here, that may absolutely be the case, that some percentage of this may have selected Couchbase, but actually really meant CouchDB. We don't know that. We can never know that data. But they compile this most loved, dreaded, and wanted language. So like the most dreaded language is VBA, for instance. Now, there's not actually a question on the survey that says, what is your most dreaded language? It's just, they say, what is the language you've worked with in the last year, and what's the language you want to work with next year? And so the way they say dreaded is if you're currently working with VBA, but you don't want to work with it next year. And they consider that to be, okay, that's a tick in the dreaded box. So we see VBA as the top, Objective-C at the top, assembly at the top. These are language. Assembly's been around since the beginning of computers. It's still dreaded, right? C, for some reason, I'm not sure why PHP is on this list. I find that to be hard to believe. And there's a bunch of others on here. These are the most dreaded languages. So this is only people who are using VBA and they don't want to use it again next year. So they consider that dreaded. If I go down to databases, look at dreaded, Couchbase is at the top. Which, you know, as Couchbase employee, that bothers me a little bit, that it's the most dreaded database. But what that actually means is that 62.7% of people who are using Couchbase this in the last year do not plan to use it again the next year. Okay? And now go back up to that very top, and it says it's like 2% actually using Couchbase. So this is a little bit... you know, again, I don't want to draw any conclusions from this, that Couchbase is the most dreaded database. And again, it could be that people are confused with CouchDB, or maybe they're using Couchbase Community or Couchbase Enterprise and they don't like one or the other. We don't know that stuff. I wish I could find every single one of these people and ask them why they don't plan to use Couchbase next year. I would love to do that. That would be great, but I don't have that information. So all I can do is speculate. But I thought I would do a little more digging about that and just do some fun stuff. And again, we can't really draw any serious conclusions about this. This is just for fun. But here's what I did. I started by saying, give me all the data from people who worked with Couchbase in the last year and their total compensation where they actually supplied one. It's not null. So they might have said NA for compensation. And I just want to say their yearly, their annual salary and get all the information. So you can see here, this person works in the United States, is familiar with US dollars, is paid yearly, and they're paid $165,000. Here's someone from Ecuador, paid $14,000 yearly, India, and so on. So then I can take this data and get the average, again, the average of this. And I can say, if I put it in table view, that the average compensation of someone who's used Couchbase in the last year, $135,000. And so a couple things I've done here is notice that I've excluded this. I'm only doing yearly, and I'm putting it between the range of greater than $900 and less than $500,000. I think those are reasonable guardrails for this, because, well, I mean, maybe I should probably restrict this to the U.S., but I kind of am here, right? But if you're making $901 annually, that seems like a mistake, that you type in the number wrong, or maybe you're just you just started work on December 15th or something. I don't know. That seems like a very low number for an annual compensation. On the other hand, $500,000 seems very high for any developer to be making. So I put these reasonable guardrails on here just to kind of make this a little bit more reasonable. And this goes to the quality of the data is a little bit wonky. The sample size here is a little small, right? You can see the total number of US developers who are using Couchbase is 260 that fit within those guardrails. So pretty low number of people, but 135,000 a year. Pretty good. Switch over to MySQL just as a comparison. It's the same exact query. We're using Couchbase instead of MySQL. 112,000. All right. And let's do Mongo. 116,000. Let's do Oracle. 112,000. So small sample size. Keep that in mind. Small sample size. But if you're using Couchbase, based on these survey results and my could be completely wrong query, you're making a lot more a year than you are with other databases. So I thought that was a pretty a fun little thing to do with the Couchbase data. Oh, not the Couchbase data, Stack Overflow data. So, all right. So what else we got in here? Just want to sort of browse through this. I've kind of run the list of all the questions that I have in the text file. But this is the kind of data that's in the survey. So if you could think of something that is interesting, query you'd want to run to multiple of these factors together, slice and dice them in some other way, just write it into the chat room and we'll get it answered. So this is they call this main branch, but this is which of the following best describes you, and it's like a checkbox of developer or engineer, things like that. Do you code as a hobby? How often do you contribute to open source? How do you feel about the quality of open source? Employment status, which country do you reside in? Are you a student? All kinds of student questions. How big is the company you work for? I don't know what dev type is. That's probably web or desktop, that sort of thing. How many years have you been coding? When did you first start coding? How many years have you been coding pro? Do you like your career? Is your manager an idiot? Are you looking for a job? When was the last time you got hired somewhere? Have you ever written FizzBuzz before? Ever been asked to solve FizzBuzz before? The most important job factors. Updated your resume. Stack Overflow they have an employment site, so they're interested in this type of information for their own purposes, I'm sure. Currency stuff, compensation, we just looked at that. How often, how much do you work per week? Do you work remotely? Where do you prefer to work? Do you do code reviews? Do you write unit tests? Are you involved in making purchasing decisions? This is the language stuff. These are all different tech categories. So language, database, platform, web framework, tech, work with. So maybe we'll do some stuff on, let's look at salaries for people who work with JavaScript, for instance, and see what the difference is. Dev environment that you use, operating system, where I look at containers, this whole blockchain thing. This is the question I'm calling the optimist question. Do you think people born today will have a better life than their parents? And these are some kind of fun questions here, but are you the IT support person for your family? You tried turning it off and on again? Which social media site do you use the most? Do you prefer online chat or real life? What do you call screen name, handle, etc.? Some Stack Overflow stuff, specific stuff. Then this is just some sort of general demographic stuff, and then some questions about the actual survey itself. So lots of good, interesting stuff in there. Why don't we? Let's see. So there's some data already about which language pays the most, right? I think those are probably already in the results over here, I believe. Yeah, top paying technologies. So it only with technologies, it doesn't really include, it only looks like it's programming languages. Oh yeah, right here. What language is associated? Okay. They don't do any report on databases or web frameworks, stuff like that. That's interesting. But so it looks like the highest salary worldwide is Clojure, and Scala's up there. Go, Erlang's up there. Erlang, not surprising that's up there. What is surprising, and maybe this because it wasn't asked, is I don't see COBOL on there at all. So let's look at some COBOL stuff. So that would be under what? That's language worked with. S.star from SOS, where S.language worked with, like COBOL. Is that even included in the survey? I wonder. Not even an option. Okay, that would be interesting, and maybe they've done this in the past, and it's just hasn't changed enough to make it worthwhile to keep asking. But from what I understand, people, COBOL is not something that people are necessarily building a ton of new stuff in, but they are maintaining systems that are sometimes decades old, and there's fewer and fewer COBOL developers out there. So the ones that are out there who are capable of learning or working with COBOL are making some real money with that. So we don't have any data on that. What else? So we've got WebAssembly in here. That's very surprising. How many people are actually being paid to use WebAssembly? That seems, I expect that to grow, but I don't expect there to be very many of them right now. All right, so maybe let's look at something else here. Got these correlated technologies. That's analysis that I probably it would be difficult to do with straight SQL, but it's interesting there. What else? Employment status. Do they talk about salaries of remote employees? Yeah, that's one thing we could look into. Interested in that to see, are employees who are remote, are they making more or less than employees who are not remote? So let's see. Work remotes. How often do you work remotes? So let's all the different options there. Okay, so I want to focus on all or almost all the time. Well, you know what? We don't have to do that. We can just group by, right? Group by s.workRemote. And I want to get compensation, right? Where is that? Comp total. Now you're supposed to enter an annual. This is a little bit confusing. Oh, please estimate. Okay, if you're hourly, you got to estimate weekly, monthly, or yearly salary. Okay, so we want to say where s dot comp total. No. Yeah, we want s dot comp total. We really want to do is number comp total sum. I think that's gonna bomb because some of those fields are NA. But I want to focus on just the yearly numbers on that. So is this gonna explode? Yeah. And is number s dot comp total is not null. Will that fix it? No, it doesn't like it. So this is the way I saw this before. And there's probably a better way to do this, but I just did a subquery. We can take this group by out of there. I still call this DT for drive table, even though this isn't actually a table. All right, so DT dot work remote, and then we're going to do average of DT. Is number. Yes, I'm surprised. That is Boolean. Yes, you're right. Is number is Boolean. Okay. Yeah. I think I screwed this up. Where is number is true. Okay. We can say s dot. So maybe I should have done that instead. I'll try taking an average of a Boolean. Anyway, comp total. Okay, will that work? Resolve. Oh, yeah. This is DT. The group by. I'm getting no results. What am I doing wrong here? What am I doing wrong? Is number false, false, false. Oh, because it's never a number for some reason. Okay. Huh. Okay. It's always a string, so it's always returning false. I'm not sure why that is. What did I do over here? I did two number is not null. Do it like that. Okay. That's still not right. Oh, yep. As. Thank you, Sanad. Okay. And let's order this by average DT comp total descending. Okay, so anyone who says NA whatever that reason, is making a ton of money. They are making gobs of money. That is $120 billion. So I think one of the problems here, again, is currency. So probably need to break this up by currency symbol, right? Let's see. We got a question. Can you do average salary for a remote worker from Russia? Want to know my future prospects? Ha ha. Yeah, I can do that one. That one. Yes. Let's first break this down into, I think, currency symbol. That's what we'll go to. S.currency symbol. I think that's probably the best way to go about this. And we'll group this, and we'll select work remote. This is going to be a pretty big result. Currency symbol, group by currency symbol. This is going to be a lot of results, I think. Yeah. Calvin Allen, another gift? What is going on here, Calvin? Appreciate that, man. There you got it, gift sub there. So, SO Dewey, is SO stand for Stack Overflow by any chance? Because that's what I'm using SO here on my aliases. Thank you very much, Calvin. Hey, Calvin is just rocking it today. Okay, so, yeah, so the problem here is that it's all broken up by currency symbol. So what we should probably do is reduce this to just the one currency symbol we want to focus on. So let's start with US. That's where I am, the US. Okay, so you can see here that we're by descending. Okay, so again, there's some weird outliers here. So the average US salary, you randomly generated your name. Okay, pretty good randomly generated name. So if you're working less than half the time, but at least one day each week, in the U.S., you're making on average $723,000. That seems wrong to me. Someone's entered some data wrong here. If you're working all or almost full-time remote, $182,000. Again, that seems a little high, but more reasonable. The it's complicated is $130,000. A few days each month, $125,000. Less than once per month, never, $108,000. So it seems to me, maybe not the exact numbers here because there's some wonkiness going on, but it seems to me that the more you make more money, the more remote you are. Now, again, there's a danger here of correlation and causation. So it may be the case that you would take a remote job because it pays more, or vice versa, that remote jobs pay more, or some combination of those things. So it's not something we can say one is the cause of the other. They are correlated. Sanad Meskin, can you count them? Maybe there are just two of them, and one is a CEO of Facebook. I think we could do a count, right? Just to get an idea, and we can do ranges and stuff. So there's 1,600 people in that less than half the time weird category, and it looks like the plurality of people are not working at home, or they're working at home a few days each month. So most of the people are like that. And then third place is all or almost all the time, 2,000. So we could exclude the CEO of Facebook, perhaps. We could say, and to number s.comp total is less than, I did this before, less than 500,000. I think this will work. And comp total is greater than, what did I say, 900? So if I do that, if I exclude those like extremes, which might be outliers, they might not be, they might be mistakes, who knows? If I exclude those, then we've got a much more reasonable average amount here. So we'll call this what? Average comp. So yeah. So again, it kind of follows the my initial hypothesis, by the way, was that remote workers probably make more, and that's what this data is bearing out. So, again, it's I wouldn't necessarily call this causation. I'll call it correlation. I'm not saying you should quit your job and find a remote job because you're going to make 20,000 more a year. Calvin got a weird side note. What is that? Do you have a weird side note? Why are the columns in the results set not in the same order you defined in the query editor? Good question, Calvin. I don't know the answer to that. So I know back in the normal query, the non-analytics query, they put them in alphabetical order, which is something that's always bothered me, and they've said they won't fix. They won't change that. But in analytics here, I'm not sure why they're in this order that they're in. Specifically, why is work remote and currency symbol, why are they switched? It might be the case that it's following some sort of weird ordering. What if I switch these? Yeah, okay. Put this up front. Like, it seems like the alias ones are being treated differently. They're being sort of stuck at the end in alphabetical order. I don't know. That's a weird one. Yeah, I don't know. It's almost alphabetical by traditional field, then alphabetical by calculated. That's what I think. That's what I was trying to say, but you said it much better than I did. I don't know why that is. That's a good question. But there you go. So you wanted to know. The question was average salary for a remote worker from Russia. So what is the SO Dewey? Maybe you can post in there. What is the currency symbol code for? I assume that's rubles. Is that what they use in Russia? Russian ruble. I think rub. Currency symbol rub. Yep. Okay. So let's look at rub. Okay. Not much data to go on here. And this may be because I've restricted it to yearly. We've got 5 total results. And it looks like it says that working remotely, you're going to make 1/4 what someone's going to make who doesn't work remotely. That is 5 total people. That is not enough to make any sort of statistical conclusion from. We could maybe try to let's just try to make this a little less restrictive. So let's add comp frequency to our results. So include every comp frequency. And we'll get rid of all those. And we'll group by comp frequency as well. So maybe it's the case that in Russia it's a lot more common to work hourly. What did I do wrong here? Encountered and. Oh, because this is should be aware. Okay, so we got a lot more results now. Okay, so it looks like maybe it was more common for Russians or those being paid in rubles to calculate it by monthly. So let's order by DT comp frequency, and then, yeah, let's do that. Okay. So it looks like if we're going by monthly, which has the most results there, is monthly. So if you're almost all the time full-time remote, you're $181,000 on average. If you're not remote, then you're 120,000. Well, that's not dollars; it's rubles. Sorry. So we have to think about the exchange rate here. But so that's the amount of rubles. So 1,000 rubles equals $15. So I could, for instance, what would I just divide this by? I don't know. Rubles exchange rate. So we take rubles. Okay. Multiply it by that, and that'll give us dollars. That seems very low to me. Am I doing this backwards? Or I don't know. I don't know enough about Russian economics to say whether that's a good number or not. that's monthly compensation. So okay, that's a little more reasonable. Okay, I'm still thinking in terms of annual. Okay, that makes more sense down here. 2.7 thousand a month is good. Yeah, I'd say that's not too shabby. But it looks like, again, the remote work is being paid more on average than not remote work. So take that, again, it's not a conclusion. It is not causation. It is purely correlation. And I also want to note the sample size here is very, very small. The total number of people is very small. Not statistically significant is how we'd say that in the statistics world. So we're just sort of playing around with data here. We're not coming to any real conclusions. But really good question though, SO Dewey. Thank you for that. You guys are asking some really good questions today. What else can we talk about? We spent a lot of time talking about compensation. What else is there? Optimism? Purchasing influence? I wonder if purchasing influence has any connection to language. Like which language? But the problem with that is language is an array basically. I think we could do something with that. So the question I'm thinking of in my head. So let me just paste this one here first. The question I'm thinking of is, do the users of any some particular languages have more purchasing influence than others? Which is to say, if I write in JavaScript, do I have more purchasing influence than those who write in Ruby, for instance, or vice versa? I suspect, my hypothesis is no, that there's not any connection there. But I would love to be surprised by this, to say that, oh yeah, Python developers have way more influence on purchasing than JavaScript developers. So how are we going to go about this? So the first thing we need to do is what is purchasing influence? So purchasing influence, let's bring up the question here. So what level of influence do you personally have over new technology purchases at your organization? So, if you want a new laptop, or you want a new server, or you want to start using JetBrains, ReSharper, stuff that you need to purchase to use at your job. Not everyone can just go out and buy whatever they want to. They have to get it approved by their manager, or depending on what it is, they may have to go up further in the chain, that sort of stuff. This is a question that a lot of salespeople are really hone in on as well. Should I spend my time talking to this person and when they have no influence on whether to buy it or not? So it'd be interesting to see what that corresponds to. All right, so the problem here is, the first problem is data formatting, in that we have language worked with from SO. Let's just look at 10 of those. And you can see the results here. It's that we have a bunch of these technologies all together in one place, and we can't really group them the way they are like this. So what we can do, and if I have to remember how to do this, I have to look up the documentation for this probably. We want SQL developers. Does cross apply works in Couchbase? I don't know what cross apply is. Maybe you could explain that? Like a cross join? Is that kind of what you're getting at? What I'm looking for is, I'm looking at the nickel, even though I'm not using nickel per se, I'm using SQL++, but looking for something. For example, in T-SQL, when you want to get one value, you can use it in where. To get one value, you can use it in where. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Still not really sure what you mean by that. Split is what I want to use here. Cross apply. Select average equals, select where average is greater than 10. So I think what you're talking about is maybe a let, the equivalent of a let here. So like I'm going to do a split with this with semicolon, right? So that's going to split it into an array, that sort of thing. But I could also remember how to do this. Let foo equals like that, and select foo. Yeah, I'm doing this wrong. Put the let in the right place. Yeah. So I can sort of define like a kind of like a function here, like an alias. For example, you can use cross apply to concat first name and last name and use it in that's basically what I'm doing here. It's called a let in this case, where I'm saying let foo equal the results of this split, and then I can refer to foo elsewhere. So it's interesting. It calls it cross apply in T-SQL. I think let. I'm not sure about this, but I think let is more common. Like you'd see that in Oracle or MySQL or Postgres, or maybe a couple of those. I don't know for sure, but it's interesting to know. So I learned something new, that this let can also be called a cross apply. Very interesting. Thank you for that. All right, so language array is that, and what I can then do is I can do what's called an unnest. And I'll just call this as language. And so then I'll select language. So what this does is, okay, so that might not work with let. Yeah, so I can't use an unnest with a let together. It's interesting. I'm learning all kinds of new stuff here. But I can flatten this out, that array out. So now you notice I've split this data out. It's basically kind of like a join. I'm joining that semicolon delimited array with the document itself. And so then, for instance, I could say s dot, s dot respondent. And you'd expect to see the same respondent multiple times, right? So respondent 1 uses these 4, and respondent 10 uses these 6, etc. So we can start to break this down. So then I wanted to get purchasing power, right? That was purchasing power. Purchase what? Desktop purchase what? Okay, so there's the purchasing power. Let me think about this. Yes, I think I'm on the right track. So I take out the respondent, don't need that. So I've got language, I've got purchasing power, and all I really need now is count, right? And I'll just group by language s dot purchase what. Let's see what happens here. Okay, and then total, and I'm going to order it by count descending. See who has the most purchasing power. So the NAs, I'm going to exclude those where s dot purchase what not equals NA. Okay, this is kind of difficult to read because they all start with I have. We can make a case statement for that. So we have, okay, so we have two things here. We've got I have little or no, I have some. We've got these numbers here. But it would be more interesting to get a percentage, right? Substring them. Yeah, I could substring them. But I think it'd be more interesting to get a percentage. So we could say and s dot purchase what equals I have little or no influence as one query. And I have some influence is another. And there's also a third one. Again, this may not be the best way to do this. I have a great deal of influence. Just focus on those three. I think that's only three we have. So this is going to be as stop language. Am I doing this right? So what I want to do is total little, and as total sum, total great, and then I want to union these. Is that going to work? Okay. Doesn't like that. What if I union all? Still doesn't like it. Why not? Encountered, I count a union at column 1. Different column names. Well, I wouldn't expect that to be a problem. 0 as total sum, 0 as total great. I would expect Couchbase to be able to handle that, but I could absolutely be wrong. It's worth a shot. Total sum. Maybe you can just have s purchase what, and I have a little. Yeah, okay. Maybe you can just set s purchase what in I have a little, I have. One query, not three. Okay, well, let's go that route. So one query. I think they have to be in the same order too, don't they? Well, maybe. I don't know all the union rules. I don't do unions very much with this. Like purchase what in list of values. So this gives me this right here. Oh, get rid of this. Going to SQL Server knowledge here, but I know in SQL Server they do have to match up like in order. So Senad, you're saying start with this kind of query here. But I know what I could do. I think, right? I could just be a let. I could say let. This has to be a case statement. So let me look at the case statement here. Statements. Select. Is there a select? I know there's a case. Pretty sure there's a case. Although I'm not sure it works in SQL++. I know it works in regular old nickel. What I'm trying to say is that let me see, what am I trying to say? Purchase little equals case. Remember the case syntax. So a case when, simple case expressions. Case when s dot purchase what is like I have little. Then 1, else 0, and I could just do a sum of these. I got an error somewhere. Does it need to go before the where? Well, it's not really returning anything. Is NA language also? Purchase little where? Oh, I made a typo here. That may be the core of the issue. Okay. I think you see where I'm going here. Let purchase little equals that. I think I can do it like this. Purchase great equals case when s dot purchase what like. Whew, sorry, excuse me. Couldn't hit the sneeze button in time. Then 1 else 0 end. Total little. Sum as total great. Oh, and we can take this out. That would make sense too, right? Oh, I'm still grouping it. A little total great. Did I spell it? Is it not I have great? It's I have a great. I have a great. Yep. Okay. And then the last one is total sum. No, purchase sum. Purchase sum equals, and then this is what I have. I have some influence. So we just put I have some. We don't really need these leading percent signs. We don't really need them. Don't need this trailing comma. Okay. So this kind of, I don't know where I could actually do with these numbers, but I kind of want to show a spread between them, right? Some sort of percentage. So maybe, for instance, I could say sum of purchase little divided by sum of purchase great as, I don't know, difference. And then, yeah, and then we can order it by that. So we don't need language of NA. Okay, so the difference here would be if you have little influence. If there's a lot of people with little influence and a few people with, I'm trying to figure out if this number is higher is good or lower is good, right? So if a lot of people with little, yes. So the higher the number, the worse it is, right? So let's just do ascending. So these are languages where people who use them have the most influence on technology decisions. Okay, so we're kind of seeing some interesting results here. For one, it's not, here at the top, it's not very stark. It's very close to 1. But there's a pretty big jump here between Elixir, WebAssembly, and Erlang to the next one, which is Dart. And down towards the bottom, we've got Java, VBA, C#. We've got others. I don't know where others one fits in. SQL. So this is interesting because this kind of goes towards we talked about the dreaded technologies, and VBA was at the top of that list. And so people who say, I'm using VBA now, I don't want to use it next year, those VBA developers also tend to have very little influence on technology purchases, which that kind of checks out, right? Because if I had my way, we'd be purchasing some other software package besides VBA, right? So that kind of checks out. The top of the list here, Elixir, WebAssembly, Erlang. So Erlang's been around for a long time, but I feel like there's not a ton of Erlang developers. There's not like a huge talent pool out there, as cool as Erlang is. And I don't know enough about Elixir to say anything like that. WebAssembly is very leading edge, so it kind of would make sense that people who are working in WebAssembly would have some more say, like, hey, we're working on something bleeding edge here. I'm going to need us to purchase this tool and this tool and this tool. And be like, yeah, that's fine, because we know what we're working on a product or something that's relatively new, relatively innovative. So we're going to take your word for it that you need that sort of thing. Whereas at the bottom you have the more enterprise type languages, like Java is down here, C#, C++. I don't know enough about R or Scala to say anything about that, but SQL's down here. JavaScript is down here. It's very interesting. Okay, with a little index here, kind of. So my hypothesis was no, and I think I was wrong. I was kind of wrong. Those who are using Elixir, I can't spell, Wasm, Erlang, seem to have more influence. And again, this is not causation. If you start using Erlang, it doesn't mean you're going to suddenly be able to decide what kind of laptop you're going to purchase next. But it's interesting that there is some variation here, and there's some difference. You know, there's this sort of this 2.0 line here that assembly and C are kind of hanging around. And then you have at the way top end, you have VBA and Java. And the way bottom, you have Elixir, WebAssembly, Erlang. So it's interesting. Interesting results there. Oh, all right. So anybody else? Looks like we got a handful of viewers still. Anybody else think of any interesting questions? Did I miss any interesting questions? I don't think I missed any. So I plan to be streaming for until about 3:30, but I think we've done a lot here already. Asked some really interesting questions. We started with some simple stuff like people who think their managers are idiots. And we moved on to Senad's question about the average age of people who don't use containers. It's very interesting. And average salary. This is just some fun, cheeky stuff I was doing with Couchbase usage and salary. Average salary for a remote worker from Russia, because someone wanted to. It was so Dewey actually wanted to know that for his future prospects. So he's moving to Russia, perhaps, or maybe he's going to graduate soon and wants to work from home. Or maybe he's he just wants to work from home. He's interested in seeing how that would affect his salary. And I had this weird one that we just finished working through about purchasing influence. Oh, SO Dewey, you're graduating in a year. Okay, well, congratulations. A little early for congratulations. I don't want to congratulate you too early, but any particular reason why you're looking at remote work over going into the office for your first the first part of your career? I'm a huge proponent of remote work. However, the first part of my career was spent going into offices, actually doing the commute. I've never been. I don't think I've known anyone who's always worked remote. So it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are on that. But my hypothesis was that users of a particular language don't have any more purchasing influence than others. I was slightly wrong about that. But for the most part, it seems like languages are, have a relatively tight distribution of influence. So one way to read this. So do I actually just got a part-time office job, but in the future I want to go remote. Okay. That's good. That's good for you. I hope you find something good. There's a couple, again, since you're in Russia, I don't know if I can help as much, but there's, for one, I recommend you read a book called Remote by Jason Fried and David Hennemeyer Henson. It's called Remote Office Not Required. It is a fantastic book, really easy read. I don't know if you speak English or read English very well, but I don't know if there's a translation or not. It's a great, great book about remote work. Definitely check that one out. And there's a website called We Work Remotely, which is by the same people who wrote the book, that posts exclusively remote opportunities. And it's not just engineers, programmers, but it tends to be that, right? Just because of the pedigree of the site. But there's lots of other stuff in there, so you can browse through remote programming jobs on here. So definitely check those out. See if there's anything you're interested in. They're not sponsors of the show or anything. I just, I happen to be a huge fan. So back to the results here. I was going to say, one way to interpret this, it says, thanks, all full-time. Thanks, I'll check it out. I don't know if they're all full-time. They might be. Some of them might be part-time. I don't really, I used to look at that site a lot, but I don't much anymore. I'm pretty happy with my job right now, so I haven't really kept track of those trends on there. So you can kind of read this as those who work with Java are about 2.8 times, have 2.8 times, maybe I can switch this around, make it a little more readable. And change this to descending. So if I execute it like this will just be the inverse. Those who use Elixir have 1.06 times as much influence over purchases compared to Java, where you have 65% less influence over purchases than a hypothetical even language, which would be 1.0, which there isn't one, but these are pretty close. So you can see as we go down this list, the ones at the top, if you use Elixir, you have more purchasing influence. You use Java, you have the lowest purchasing influence. So interesting. Let's use that query instead. I like that one. All right. So I actually did this stream because I'm working on a presentation for an upcoming conference, a couple of conferences actually, a presentation called Intro to SQL++, and I'm going to make a demo part of it. And so these are some really good queries that I can present as these are I got from my stream. These people were asking questions, and so we wrote some live queries, and this is what we came up with. So this is great. Thank you all very much for your help. I appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. So I think at this point I'm going to wrap up the old stream, but let's look at the possibilities of a raid. So I want to find. Let's bring up my team here, my Twitch live streaming team, and see who is up for a raid. The Michael Jolly is up for a raid. So we're going to go ahead and raid the Michael Jolly. If you're going to join in on that raid, he's lots of fun, and just I don't know. You don't have to say anything, but tell him you came from Matthew D. Grove's channel. I think he'll enjoy that. So that's it for today. Thank you everybody for joining. I am going to trigger the raid now. I think this will work. But I won't be back until I'm taking a vacation, so I won't be back for another couple weeks. I'll be back on a Thursday. So everyone have a good weekend, and we'll see you soon.